generating leads online, one of the biggest things that you can do and one of the biggest challenges that there is, and one of the easiest way to convert those online leads in the long term is have a great lender partner. Today I'm here with Ian Bennett, an amazing mortgage loan officer, broker extraordinaire with Elevations Credit Union here in Colorado. And so we're just gonna dive into this and kind of get going on how partnering with a good lender will help you generate and close more deals. All right, Ian, thanks so much for coming and hanging out with me today and talking about some different things going along in the market. Now, I know there's a lot of challenges happening right now in the market with mortgage rates and shifting and things like that. So let's just sit down and, I know tons of agents are coming to you every single day and just asking, hey, what's going on? What's happening? And I know you give great advice. So let me know, what are some of the things that you're telling agents and, even people that need to buy a home?
Sure, right now? You bet. Well, first of all, Ryan, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate working with other professionals that are looking to help and grow the pool of folks that are out there. My personal belief is an educated agent is going to strongly outperform an uneducated agent. A lot of that has to do with my background, and I'll just give you a little quick background about mine. About me, I've been in mortgage business 16 years. In that 16 years, I've originated probably close to 2,400 loans at this point. So I spent the better half of 38,000 hours grinding on the craft, Right. So I bought and sold 16 homes of my own, but all of that I learned from partnering with people like you, learning from experts. I really, truly believe that success leaves clues. So a lot of what I talk about is stuff that I've sourced from other places. And, one of the things that I've been hearing a lot from agents and folks that are in the market, whether it's consumer agent, what have you, is, what's going on. So the top three things I think I've been hearing a lot about is, when is the housing market going to normalize, whatever normal means?
Right.
The other one would be, is inflation infecting the housing market and economy? And quite frankly, the third, which is really connected to the first, which is interest rates, which all three of those connected, right?
Right.
So by no means am I an economist. And yes, I do work for a company, but everything we're going to talk about today is my personal opinion. It's not the company's opinion. But starting with the low-hanging fruit. So I look at the housing market as on a macro level as opposed to micro, if I'm saying that correctly. Again, right. I am street smart. I learned everything I learned, everything I've done. The 16 houses I've bought and sold are all from just hard work. So I'm not an economist. And I do read a lot of folks that know what they're talking about, read about a lot of folks. And starting with inflation. I think that's my least favorite because I'm the least knowledgeable about it. But I do believe a lot of folks are wondering where inflation is going. And what I understand about inflation is as the Fed is trying to quell or dampen inflation, they're going to have different levers they can pull. The biggest one that I'm seeing is interest rates, short-term interest rates. Mm-hmm. It's thought that the top of inflation, depending on who you talk to, and the Fed seems to be behind on this, but it's thought that June of this year, so if we're recording here in 2022, June of this year was the peak, according to the non-Fed folks that I talked to. And I talk with some really brilliant folks that have been in the market a lot longer than me, but also in the housing market on different ends of it. So I think in terms of inflation, we've seen the top. Mm-hmm. Now, with that said, we'll probably see the Fed continue to increase short-term interest rates, so the Fed fund rate. We've been seeing those clips at about like 0.75 or 75 basis points, which for me, a guy who's building a house right now with a construction loan that's attached to prime, it's pretty brutal. With that said, it's expected they're going to go from 75 basis points down to 50 or a quarter each jump they do. I believe, if my memory serves me right, December 13th, there's another Fed meeting. So we're expecting that's going to change. And I may be wrong. I might be switching that with, it's either a Fed meeting on December 13th or it's another consumer price index. Either one, the concept is if the numbers are looking better from employment, consumer price index, and overall economic conditions, then they may slow raising rates.
Okay.
That's how I understand it.
Right.
Now, how does that translate to the housing market? Well, in my opinion, the housing market is what really runs our economy, right? The tax laws are in favor of business owners and homeowners and really home investors, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So the tax code is written, and again, this is my opinion, the tax code's written in a way where it really benefits those folks and we drive that economy. Not to get too political, but I would imagine the government doesn't want to deal with housing and they don't want to deal with basically employing everyone. So they want employers to do well and they want housing to do well. So I think that's always going to be the center of their direction on the economy. So I think that inflation is affecting our interest rates, which is affecting our consumer in terms of buying homes, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the inflation topic.
Okay.
The other topic was, do we think that interest rates are going to continue to rise? On the Fed side, I think they're going to continue to bring them up. However, mortgage-backed security bonds, or with our personal bank, we're basing our interest rates on a bond market as opposed to what the Fed's lending money to banks, the federal funds rate.
Right.
What I believe is going to happen is probably around spring, we're going to see interest rates soften. And what I mean by soften is right now we're probably in that low 7s, high 6 for a 30-year fixed mortgage. A lot of folks are using adjustable rate mortgages because they know the long term you may have lower interest rates on adjustable rate mortgage, which makes it more affordable to buy. Totally different topic. And I think what we're going to find is in the spring, we're going to see interest rates dip into the 5s. And everyone that's hanging out on the fence waiting for something to happen are going to jump back into the market.
Yeah.
So,
which is probably going to be a huge issue because right now we're definitely in a housing shortage as far as homes getting listed on the market and different things like that. So people, yes, they're all waiting for this big crash, but 20% crash is not that big of a number in a mortgage payment. Am I right?
Yeah, and here's the thing,
especially when everyone 5 to 7 to 3.
Absolutely. So the consumers and the folks that have been around long enough, because when we're talking about 20 and 30-year-old buyers, it's different than talking about 40, 50, 60-year-old buyers. So I'm 45. I've seen enough market shifts. I know from my experience that this isn't 2008. So a lot of folks are like, oh, interest rates are going to go to 10%. People are going to lose their houses. This, that, and the other things are going to go on. Well, what's different is the lending guidelines before were very loosey-goosey. Mm-hmm. I got into the business in 2006 because I like to think I didn't have anything to do with that. So people were buying homes they couldn't afford. Mm-hmm. And then at the time, they were buying houses they couldn't afford with adjustable rate mortgages, which are a great tool if used properly. Mm-hmm. But also the overall climate then was buying, well, you could buy more because you didn't really have to qualify.
Right.
So we had that crash. And what that crash was about was foreclosures and short sales, people walking away from homes that they couldn't deal with. Yeah. At that time, we had what I refer to as shadow foreclosures. So month after month and year after year, those banks would start laying out those foreclosures. So the market kept going down and down and down. And depending on where you were in the country, that could have been a 40% decrease. And if you were in different parts of Colorado, that could have been a 0.5% decrease or level.
Yeah, I was going to say Boulder, Colorado, I think 2009, it was 1.3% decline. And then 2010 was 0.09 decline.
Right.
And then we just went back up.
And that's Boulder County, right?
Right, Boulder County.
Which a couple of zip codes were as much as 3, but there's others that were positive.
Right.
So bringing that full circle, I think that in order for us to have a housing crash and for prices to really come down, we need to have foreclosures and short sales. Now, there are going to be, I think it's the 3 or 4 Ds, but the ones that come to mind for me are death, divorce, things that are going to make folks have to move. And some of those are sort of forced sales. I wouldn't call them forced foreclosures. But we have a lot of people in the last 4, 5, 6 years that bought or refinanced on 15 and 30-year loans at 2, 3, and 4%.
Yeah.
Those folks, unless they have to move, they're not going to leave their property.
Right.
Right. So now we're dealing with folks that are saying, okay, interest rates are twice what they were before. How do I afford a property? And that goes to the whole, well, what are interest rates going to do? We think they're going to lower a bit, but quite frankly, does it matter? Who are you working with? Who are we talking to who's buying, right? So to answer the question directly, I think interest rates are going to soften in the spring, and eventually to bring a normal market, which there's no such thing as a normal housing market. It's always moving, right? It's like life. You don't really know what's going on. Just when you think you've got it figured out, it's going to change.
Yep.
If we stay in the fives, I think what we'll see is the market heat back up again. But that's, again, we don't have the supply.
Right. So
that's going to push a higher demand. So I think we may not see what we saw the last 18 months, but we're going to see bidding wars again. Just my opinion. Yeah. So again, interest rates are going to be softening. So when are we going to get to a normal housing market? Again, there's no such thing as normal. One would argue there's a balanced housing market where you have the appropriate amount of sellers and the appropriate amount of buyers. But we know with the tightening, I think it's like 21 or 22% of builder starts have gone down because of loan applications being very similar in the last few months. So now the builders are like, oh, we got to stop building houses because the demand's not there. Well, we're $6 million homes, 6 million homes short of the demand of what we need.
Right.
And that's an interesting number because I have to fact check myself on that. I don't know if that's nationally or state. It's a statistic I read recently. The basic point is we are going to have a shortage, period. Right. So if we have a bunch of people jump back in, I think we're going to end up in the same situation we were less than 6 months ago. I mean, interest rates started to hike in March, and it takes, I think, about 6 months of what the Fed sees to start seeing the effect of that on inflation. So I think that's delayed. What I can say in terms of converting buyers into or leads into buyers is this education is if you're sitting on the fence, here's the things that I believe based on my experience that should get you to get off the fence. Right. And I think that may be something more we should talk about is the folks that are sitting on the sidelines that are wondering if they should buy. If they're first-time home buyers, yesterday was the best time to buy, right?
Right.
Because if I'm a first-time home buyer, right now I'm renting or living in a family member's house or what have you. My rent is 100% interest rate. My equity and my forced savings by paying down my rent is 0. So it doesn't really matter. If you can afford to do it now, and what I mean by that, if you can work with a great real estate agent and a great lender to figure out how we can buy down interest rates in the short term, get you into your home, that when interest rates drop, assuming they will, pretty sure they will, then you can refinance in there. Right. But what I can tell you is if you wait for that, I don't know, let's use an average home price of $500,000 in Denver Metro. If you're looking at buying a $500,000 house now with a 7% interest rate, because it's no longer 550 or 560 or 580 because you're bidding with someone else. For every percentage point that interest rate goes up or down, you can afford 10% more. Yeah. So if you bought it now at 7%, your payment's going to be less than if you bought it 6 to 8 months ago at 4%. Right. That makes sense. But what happens when you wait for interest rates to go down? That same $500,000 house is on the market in May, June, July, and interest rates do come down to 4 or 5%. Yep. Now you're bidding with 16 or 18 other people on that. That's going to go back up pretty quick. And it doesn't have to increase too much to offset that interest rate. Yeah. But at that point, you don't have the ability to refinance down the line because the rates have already dropped. So those are the conversations we've been having. And I think it's really the psychology of money. What is most important to that lead and what they're trying to figure out? And how do we add value in education so that they trust us now as agents or lenders to be able to give them advice and let them make the choice?
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things that I find is definitely you want to give people the educational content, but not push them into buying a home. It's like, here's the information. Here's what I would do. I would buy a house today. You know, why? Well, guess what? Who is buying houses today, right? I'm going to tell you. Blackstone, all the big, open doors and all those guys, guess what? Yeah, they've lost billions of dollars, but guess what? They're still buying homes faster than you can believe. And it is absolutely insane. So, I mean, got the inside skinny at one of those conferences where that's what they were just doing is cash buyer programs and people like that were going out and trying to buy these, homes, off-market homes for cash value and all that kind of fun stuff, right? And they're paying top of market prices just like everybody else, which is great for the sellers, right? But now when things shift, then they get stuck. But guess what? They unload that stuff really quick, and then they're still buying more at today's rates because they know it's such a good deal right now. And yeah, money's a little bit more expensive. Things are a little bit tighter. But guess what? If there's a huge foreclosure thing happening, you know who's going to buy those? Those guys. Yeah,
the institutional investors, it's sort of like big banks, right? I work for a not-for-profit small credit union. We happen to be the number one purchase financial institution in the state, and we're more nimble and small. But what you'll see is those big institutional banks or investors, they're going to go up and down. They're going to change. They have stockholders they have to deal with, right?
Right.
With that said, I do believe that we can't go away from the fact that the demand is going to be there because the supply is so low. The other thing to take into consideration is, as the economy catches up, as we have the supply chain that's becoming more accessible and less expensive and so on. And obviously there's so much more we could, if we wanted to pretend to be economists. But so let's just say that's getting better and the economy's getting better. What we do know in most great, and what I mean great is successfully balanced economic metro areas have a strong shortage for land. Mm-hmm. That's not going to change.
Right.
The age-old proverb is we're not making any more land. Mm-hmm. So if you're living in a rural area, it's a different conversation. But most of the top producing real estate agents in the country are around metro areas that have an economy. And most of those economies that are doing well, they have a shortage of land because of development and development rights and the fact that there's only so much square footage of dirt. So I look at it long term. Warren Buffett, we were discussing earlier, his whole premise is figure out your plan and execute your plan and don't worry about market conditions. You got to stay the course.
Yep.
Super simple on paper, but hard to do when your emotions are involved. I personally believe as I look at every single investment I make, whether it's my primary residence or investing in real estate, which, I love doing, is what does it look like over a 10-year period? Mm-hmm. If I had nothing else except for this property, can I keep this for 10 years based on my current income? That means my income doesn't increase. I don't get any pay raises. I don't, have any windfalls, what have you. And I look at it that way. What I can tell you again is if I'm a first-time home buyer, I can't afford to rent for 10 years.
Definitely not.
Because I'm losing out every single time I make that payment, that mortgage payment for someone else. Mm-hmm. So, I hate to downplay the economic climate, and I hate to downplay inflation. I hate to downplay where interest rates are going to go. I hate to downplay when are we going to be in a normal market, but there isn't. It's always shifting. There's no normal. Right? It's just like us as humans. We wake up in the morning, our heart rate's lower than we go to bed, but it changes through the day, right? So we need to know what our temperature is, or what our gauge, or what our threshold is. And that's the part on lead generation for me is when I'm talking with a new lead, and most of mine are generated from awesome real estate agents that send them my way.
Yep.
And they realize the most important part is get the finances figured out. Because when we come under the gun, so to speak, to figure out which property we want to buy, we want to make sure the finances are figured out right away. Yeah. So what I talk to the consumer about when the leads come in is where are you at in your head, and what are these questions that we haven't answered today that need to be answered so that we can make sure that we can move down the line. Because here's the deal: we want to help as many people as we can, but some people you cannot help.
Right.
And it's determining. And if you have a good lead funnel, and you have a lot of leads coming in, you have to figure out which ones are the good ones pretty quickly. Which ones incubate, which ones you act on then, but what is that value that they need? And I would imagine you can speak to this better than anyone. Each individual lead is going to have a different need, right?
Yep.
And being able to educate yourself in those spaces. I will tell you, after 16 years of doing this, there's not a lot of different buckets.
No.
There's most people, and I'm not trying to say this in a poor way, but most people fit into one or two or three buckets. And me personally, I'm a big bucket person. I want to know the big details, how it works. I'm an 80% person, meaning that if I can hit on target 80% of the time, I know that I'm going to win for what I need to do.
Yep.
Now, when I'm originating mortgages, I'm a 120% person. I want every single piece to be perfect. But just like a good agent, I have systems and processes for that.
Yeah.
The consumer has to feel like you understand this is my opinion, their psychology around these issues, and then how you're going to take care of them.
Yep.
And the way I do that, just like you, and why we get along so well, is we provide solutions to their problems, but ask what they are up front, and then we have a system. And when I'm talking to an engineer, I'm like, here's my system. It's these bullet points, the ones and zeros, right? And then when I'm talking to someone who is more of a counselor mindset, left and right brain, they want to know the process, but they want to know how it's going to feel. So I let them know, I'm not going to get too nitty gritty in these pieces, but it's really the whole concept of figuring out what their fear is and figuring out how we can best counsel that.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And basically the biggest thing is, should somebody buy a house now? Should somebody buy a house in 2023? Or should somebody not buy a house at all? Right.
Sure.
And so that has 100% to do with them and their unique situation. Right?
That's right.
And like you said, first time home buyers, they need to buy it no matter what the market is. Because that's the only way you can start growing, wealth, really. So.
Yeah, it has to fit the matrix, right? So the first thing I would ask is, I can say, is this your first house? Then I know they fit in this bucket. Oh, my kids are going to college and my wife and I, or my spouse and I, or whatever, are thinking about downgrading or upgrading. Okay, where are you right now? Maybe you can wait.
Yeah.
But the fact that everyone should wait until the fall, but when the interest rates and this and that's going to happen, see what happens during the hot season, try to plan it and time it. It's like Frogger. There's only so much planning. At some point, you have to go.
Yes.
And what I found is, at 45, the one thing I know that I'm burning every single day is time.
Yep.
And what we do know from any good investment or even if I just want to buy this house to live in and have a roof over my head, but I want to do it financially properly. Even though most of the stuff I've been taught for the last 30 years doesn't apply now from my grandma and everything else, but things have changed. But I know that the longer I wait, no matter what category I'm in, the less time I have to build equity. Yep. The less time I have to get the hours in. Malcolm Gladwell, have you read some of his books?
Oh, yeah.
I want to say it's either Outliers or Tipping Points, probably Outliers, where he basically made it very simple for me, is until you've done something for 10,000 hours, you're an amateur. So if you want to be pro of something, you need to do it. 2,000 hours, 40 hours a week, 2,000 hours a year, that's 5 years of doing something. So the sooner that you buy your first house, the sooner you get to the point where you're like, oh, I understand that I've built this wealth. I'm sort of an expert at being a home buyer now. Now I can decide, do I want to stick here and that's it? Or do I want to, I'm very biased to real estate, but you can't time the market, in my opinion.
Right.
It's the time that you have in it. And I did not make that up. That's probably another Warren Buffett quote.
Yes. Well, when I first got into real estate and into the real estate market, I bought my first house at 21. So, it's a little different than most people.
Yeah.
But of course I was married then and had to, right? So during that kind of stuff, and it was a terrible market, but I'm like, well. And so I still bought it, fixed it up, made some money on that, went and put it into another one and another one and another one and another one. And then before you knew it, I had a house that was dang near paid off. And, it was a $500,000 house back then.
Right.
Which now it's probably like $1.5 million house. So even in a crashing market.
Right. And I think, a big part, and I would feel really irresponsible not bringing this up, is a big part of why consumers, or why all of us, entrepreneurs, self-employed folks, real estate agents, in my opinion, they're on that tipping point between true entrepreneurs or self-employed, but either way, it's a lot of work. And most of us have been taught to have literacy in our life, read, write, math, what have you. The part that's missing, I'm stealing this from Robert Kiyosaki, is the financial part.
Absolutely.
So we have to reprogram ourselves to think about what this means financially. And the reason why a lot of people are on the fence is they have, in my opinion, they have fear. They don't know what to do because they don't have the education.
Right.
You have a PhD in whatever, economics, and you still, until you've gone through this process of getting over your fear of what's going to happen, it's debilitating, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that part, again, a book that I read recently is The Psychology of Money. I can't remember the author, but that really helped me after 16 years of doing this and being self-employed for more than 20 something years, is that every individual has their psychology around money, and us as folks that are helping people in investments and purchasing homes, we have to help figure that part out so that they can get out of their own way.
Right. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Anything else that you want to add that we should make sure that people know about this market and what's happening, before the end of the year here in 2022, 2023?
This goes in any market. And it's speaking strictly to the real estate professionals, is if you don't have a coach or a mentor right now, that is first and foremost the most important thing. I hitch my proverbial boat onto other folks such as yourself that are leaders in the market that I look to. So podcasts, reading books, but also finding a mentor in the space that can help you grow. I believe that all the most successful people that I've met, from $100 million producers in real estate and quite frankly, most of the multimillionaires that I know, all had great coaches and mentors.
Yep.
And I think double down on that, double down on yourself in growing your network. And that will help you advise folks that are trying to buy. But listen, whether it's this market or the next market, it's always going to be shifting. So we have to concentrate on what we know and being the expert. And I highly recommend coaching and mentoring for that.
Absolutely.
I know that you all have a ton of resources for that. And that's something I think that goes really, there's not a lot of self-promotion for that, but it's literally what's gotten me to where I am. And when I started, I literally was sleeping in my car. I'm not even making that up, to the point where 2 years ago, my wife and I did our first 7-figure return real estate deal. And that wasn't more than 16 years. And I'll tell you, the only reason I did it in that period of time is because I had awesome coaches and mentors, and I was always trying to find someone that I could latch onto. And I worked for a little to nothing for a long time to learn.
Yep.
So, if you're an agent that's in your 20s, find that mega agent or that coach or someone who can bring you along the way. And if you're a consumer that's listening to this, find that real estate agent that's put in that work and learn from them.
That's right.
That's the biggest thing.
I couldn't agree with you more. Definitely coaching, mentoring, huge opportunities and different things like that. You just don't see them unless you get out there and get in those different areas with people that are doing the things that you want to do. So great.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me on, man. I'd love to do this again.
You bet. We'll definitely make this a regular thing. Keep Ian coming on the channel and helping us out. One of my favorite guys to work with, of course.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cool.